Hey, what's going on, everybody? Justin here, and I'm going to attempt to do a kind of a quick TBR here. I know my TBR videos kind of drag on sometimes, so we're going to try and do my November TBR, and let's just go ahead and get started. It's going to be really heavily nonfiction because, it's nonfiction November, and if you live under a rock and don't know what that is, I'll leave a link to Olive, who hosts this whole readathon event. I'll leave her announcement video down below, and I'm going to quickly go through the first 4 books because I already talked about them as my nonfiction November TBR, and I'll leave a link to that up there and below and all that kind of stuff. So we'll do those ones real fast. I got a couple history books and a lot of nature books, so let's just go ahead and get started. And the first one is Living by the Sword by Kristen Newshell, and this is all about, swords, which is going to be kind of cool, like learning about the material culture and how it's kind of like a socio-economic factor during like kind of the, late Middle Ages and stuff. Not necessarily always like an actual usable weapon per se, but a lot of times function and form kind of combined, so it was like a usable sword that was also stylish, but I want to learn about, how it was kind of like perceived by others and by like the nobility and like regular people, all that kind of stuff, just as like a material object, which this book should do. Alright, next up is Hurricane Lizards and Plastic Squid by Thor Hansen. This is the first one I've started so far. Pretty good. I've read the first 2 chapters. Just making like a small dent. This one is all about how animals are actually kind of evolving almost like in real time to adapt to climate change. A lot of different animals have, I shouldn't say a lot of different animals, but some animals definitely have more plasticity, basically more capabilities of adapting to different like kind of stimuli and changes and stuff. And I think this book is going to be about which ones are actually kind of winning that sort of, I don't want to say arms race, but if there's like kind of a competition between like a specialist and a generalist, generally the generalist will kind of they do a little bit better if the specialist conditions deteriorate, such as with climate change and whatnot. So this, I think, is going to be about the, quote unquote winners in like kind of the animal kingdom, like kind of what's going on. And actually the plant kingdom as well, because we've already kind of talked about some plants and stuff in the first couple chapters as well. But yeah, definitely looks really interesting, like Thor Hansen's work so far. So hopefully this one turns out to be good as well. Next up is Jungle, and this is by Patrick Roberts, How Tropical Forests Shaped the World and Us. So this is all about kind of a like general history of tropical jungles, tropical rainforests, that sort of thing, historically speaking, over the different epochs of, Earth history and whatnot, but also as sort of how jungles have affected, the Homo sapiens over the past, several, tens and hundreds of thousands of years, and how we've sort of like used it, exploited it, that sort of thing. So definitely it's gonna be, I'm hoping it's not 100% gloom and doom, but things kind of, especially in the Amazon rainforest, not looking pretty good, especially with like kind of the political regime in Brazil right now. So hopefully hopefully I want to, but like I said, it's just, I'm hoping there's gonna be some good stuff, but fingers crossed there might be some kind of glimmers of hope, but it's really not looking great. And I think Patrick Roberts is going to kind of explain all that. And I assume it's going to be more than just the Amazon rainforest as well, but I think there's going to be a lot of sciencey stuff too, as well, kind of like the ecology and, environmental factors of rainforest and whatnot as well, which sounds up my alley. And then lastly, we have The Arbornaut, A Life Discovering the Eighth Continent and the Trees Above Us by Meg Lomond, and this is probably the one I'm most excited for. I'm going to try and save it off as the 4th book. Well, we'll see if I actually do that. But Meg Lomond is kind of like a pioneering Arbornaut, which are scientists that study the tops of trees by somehow like rappelling up trees or climbing up them and doing like field research, up hundreds of feet in the air of like the rainforest trees and whatnot. So I thought that was kind of cool. I've seen some stuff on National Geographic with her about building like boardwalks and things, so that sounds really cool. I don't know too much about it per se, but it just sounds like a really cool kind of mix of science and memoir. I think that's a really good combination, and hoping to kind of learn a lot about her life and why she chose to become an Arbornaut and everything like that. Alright, so now let's move on to some of the other books I haven't talked about yet. And for this month's Oxford Very Short Introduction, I'm going with Empire, A Very Short Introduction by Stephen Howe. And this is all about, the whole concept of empire. And I find this one, like, empire is kind of a weird concept because it's almost like it is what other people think it is. There's not really, I hope it kind of gets into, like, the definition of, like, empire, because there are a lot of things that have been called empires which comparatively speaking, really aren't empires compared to other, empires and stuff. So like, is it like a certain size? Because that doesn't really always make a lot of sense. Like the Athenian Empire, the Athenian Empire was basically just like a couple like Greek, I mean several dozen like Greek city-states, didn't really cover like a giant geographic area. There have been some empires that only have one ethnic group, so I always thought kind of growing up like in school, whatever, an empire was like, when you have multiple kingdoms under one banner, essentially, so it's different like ethnic groups or whatever. But that's not necessarily always the case. Does it have to be like, a certain, like, I don't know. There's so many things, like, look at me drawing blanks on like other stuff. But anyways, I saw like a lecture and like it just basically made me ask so many questions and didn't like answer anything, which isn't always a bad thing, but I'm hoping this book kind of makes me think about things in a different way, and maybe it will explain what an empire is. Alright, next up is another book. We got Rebugging the Planet, and I actually asked, what is Chelsea Green Publishing, which actually is a really cool employee-owned publisher. Definitely check them out. I asked to see if I could get this book to review it, because after reading so many books about like Insectageddon, insects are definitely kind of on the ropes as like just in general. I think it's about a third of all insect biomass. It's kind of like died over the past half century or so, which is actually like extremely bad considering they pollinate like the vast majority of plants and are like kind of the base of the food web in a lot of ecosystems and stuff. Just really bad if insects like just like get totally like wiped. I mean, obviously they're not gonna get totally wiped out per se, but I mean if too many, it's like the Jenga thing, and too many of them, and they're like I said, they're the base of a lot of food webs. Too many of them get pulled out. It's gonna be real bad news for a lot of things. And this is, I've already cheated and read like a few dozen pages out of this one as well. And it's kind of, Vicky has like kind of added like a ton of like little vignettes on like how-tos, I guess, to like make your own like little home or your garden or your backyard more insect friendly and stuff, or how to like kind of get your town to be like more insect friendly and everything. And I found that like actually kind of like really neat so far as well. If you follow like my Instagram and all that stuff, I take lots of pictures of bugs, and like dragonflies are like one of my favorite things like out there, so definitely check all that stuff. Plug for my link tree and all the different things I guess that I have and whatnot. But definitely looking forward to this one because it's kind of a mix of science and sort of just like how to can do like attitude. So it's definitely on the more positive note as far as like kind of these nature type books I've been reading so far have been. Alright, next up we have Being a Human, Adventures in 40,000 Years of Consciousness by Charles Foster. And this is all about, all I know really is this guy, I think he's like a professor or something in England, but he wanted to live as an old Stone Age, a new Stone Age, and an enlightened Homo sapien, and enlightened from like the Enlightenment and whatnot. And apparently he spent a year living as one of these, like going through each of these three like stages, I guess. And I gotta just say, props to him for living as like a Neolithic, hunter-gatherer type person, for presumably like several months or something. That's pretty good dedication, I guess, to like sort of your dedication to like anthropology or whatnot. Not 100% sure really what it's gonna be about. Like I said, I think it's gonna be kind of a mix of memoir and anthropology and science and psychology and a bunch of mishmash of stuff, which I think sometimes when you blend a lot of these genres together, it works a lot better than just purely sticking with one. So hopefully this one pans out to be like a really cool, like sort of mini biography, memoir type book. All right, we got two more history books here. One from Pen and Sword that I need to review is actually one that I'm really interested in, Sepimius Severus and the Roman Army by Michael Sage. And if you don't know who the Emperor Sepimius Severus, he was, I think he's the only emperor from Africa, and after Marcus Aurelius' son Commodus was, kind of offed, there was like a mini civil war for power, and Sepimius Severus was sort of the guy who said, finally like took the cake and was like, I'm the Roman Emperor, and just like wiped the floor with everyone else. And he kind of led the Severan dynasty for about 2 generations or so. I want to say it's like I can't remember exactly off the top of my head. It's in the 180, maybe 186 to about 235 or so. And after the Severans, it was the crisis of the 3rd century, which was just basically just total Armageddon for like the Roman Empire and stuff. But it's kind of like a neat little beginning of sort of like the collapsing era. And Septimius Severus did implement a ton of like reforms and stuff to try and like for example the Praetorians, shanked like what 5 or 6 emperors. He kind of like reformed them. It's like, yeah, you ain't doing that to me and stuff. So I think it's gonna be a really cool kind of like mini biography. These pen and sword books are really cool, and they got really niche kind of biographies and topics if you're interested in pretty much any kind of like military history and a lot of like ancient history and stuff like I am. So definitely looking forward to Sepimius Severus. And lastly is the history book that I was talking about in another video that I want to read before the end of the year, and it's Four Queens, the Provençal Sisters Who Ruled Europe by Nancy Goldstone. And this is because I have been doing really bad reading medieval history this year. So I just picked one up that I've had for a long time that I need to get to. And this is all about a family of queens. I think it was England, Normandy, Sicily, and was it Spain or the Holy Roman Empire? Anyways, Germany. So yeah, France, England, Germany, Sicily, and I just think that's kind of like obviously during like the High Middle Ages, all these families were like super intertwined and kind of halfway inbred and all that kind of stuff. But still, having 4 living sisters, like as you know, the queen consorts of different countries and stuff, just thought it'd be a really cool kind of like look into sort of different like kind of family dynamics and things. Just because obviously if there's 4 of them, they're going to be at each other's throats probably half the time, but maybe they actually like really got along with each other and kind of pulled some strings behind the scenes and whatnot to get things done. I'm not 100% sure, but that's why I'm going to be reading it. Alright, so thank you so much for watching all the way to this point in the video if you're still here. If you want to support the channel, the best way to do it is definitely check out my Etsy shop where I sell, you know, philosophy and nature and literature quotes like this. Really like Cervantes, Don Quixote, all that kind of stuff. I'll leave that in the link tree and everything down below. Let me know what book you're most interested in reading in the month of November. And if you are participating in Nonfiction November, leave that down below. I'm excited to see who else is participating in this. And whether you're participating in Nonfiction November or not, always remember, read victoriously.